Bienvenue, benvenuti, and welcome to Expatriotical, the podcast for expats, travelers, and other adventurous souls. I'm Chandra, and after living as an expat with my husband and 4 children in 2 different countries for 6 years, I've learned the arts of pivoting during pitfalls, traveling tastefully for less, and soaking in amazing new cultures without losing your own. Join me as we dive into the joys and challenges of travel and the expat life in every episode. Hello, everyone. So glad to have you back for the 3rd and final part of our Highlights of Paris miniseries. Today, as promised, we will be covering 5 different day trips that you can take from Paris to see some pretty incredible sights. Those 5 places include Versailles, Chantilly, Fontainebleau, Château Malmaison, and Giverny. Now, don't worry if all of those names except for Versailles don't make any sense to you. I will explain what each of them is and what they offer as we get to them. All of these places I have been to personally, sometimes more than once, and all of them have really different things to offer. We're going to start with Versailles, which is actually one that I've been to a couple of times and would say that I don't actually care to go back to the palace itself, but would maybe enjoy exploring the grounds a little bit, as I really haven't gotten to do that. As a little bit of history or backdrop, Versailles was built by King Louis XIII when he had gone, or after he had gone, to the area of Versailles that was thick with woods and great for hunting, and fell in love with it. He didn't build anything initially because at that time he was simply the Dauphin or prince, but after he became the king and had visited again, he decided to build a small hunting lodge. If any of you have ever been, or anyone has even ever seen the pictures, let alone visited, you would say that the Palace of Versailles is anything but small, but it was, of course, added on to over time. Obviously, it went on in history for being known as the place where Marie Antoinette resided before she was beheaded along with her husband, King Louis XVI. And one of its most famous rooms is the Hall of Mirrors. Versailles is located about a 40-minute drive from the center of Paris. Let's say you're staying right by the Louvre, and if you had a rental car, you could get to Versailles if there was no traffic in about 40 minutes. But if you're not up for driving in Paris, you could take the RERC train that will pretty much dump you off right at the doorstep in an hour's time. That's including walking as well. A ticket to Versailles costs €21, but that's only to see the palace. And we had read things about the gardens being free. So the first time we went there, we didn't buy a ticket for the gardens. And then it happened to be a day that the fountains had a music show, and so entry into the gardens wasn't free. So I would recommend that you buy the passport ticket, which includes timed entry into the palace, which is basically where you choose the time you want to go inside, the ability to see the estate of Trianon, which I honestly don't know what that is. You can see any temporary exhibits, the gallery of coaches every weekend, the Royal Tennis Court, the gardens until the 31st of October, or also during the musical fountain show, and the park. And those tickets cost €24 in the low season and €32 in the high season. I would definitely recommend getting this. This is what we got the second time when I took my mom, and due to time limitations, I was only able to just see a little bit of the gardens, and they looked vast and like there was a maze. And it's something that my husband, Chris, would like to go back and see because he's never seen the gardens at all. But beware, visiting Versailles, especially in the summer months, can be a bit stressful. Even though you have a timed entry, the lines to get in are extremely long, and you're standing on cobblestone. So if it's a hot day, be prepared to sweat. The palace itself is beautiful, but it's going to be packed with people. I'm not saying it's not worth it, but if you really don't know a whole lot about Versailles anyway, and you just want to see a castle or chateau, as they're called in French, or a palace, I've got a couple more options that I'm going to list for you that you'll love, which aren't nearly as busy. One of those is Chateau Chantilly, which is spelled like Chantilly lace, and that's actually where it was originated. It's located just under an hour outside of Paris by car, or it's an hour and a half commute on public transportation from the center of Paris. Again, I used my reference point as the Louvre Museum. This was the first chateau that Chris and I ever saw when we moved to Paris, and I have to say, it is imposing and impressive and absolutely gorgeous. It is surrounded by a large lake, which is probably originally purposed as a moat for protection, and it has large grounds where you can rent golf carts if you don't have the ability to walk much, and I think you can rent bikes there as well, which I have to say that is something you can do at Versailles also, though I've never done that, as renting bikes, that is. Chateau Chantilly has a really cool zoo where there's kangaroos, there's a maze, there are different restaurants, and there's a lovely playground as well. When we took Chris's parents there when they first came to visit us, we had finished walking around and seeing things right around lunchtime, and we ate at the restaurant that's actually located inside of the chateau, and it was absolutely delicious and honestly not crazy overpriced. And for admission to the chateau itself, it's €18 per person for anyone over the age of 25 and $14.50 for anyone between the ages of 7 and 25. And that includes visiting the chateau, the park, and the gardens, etc. Or you can buy a family ticket, which includes 2 parents and 2 or 3 kids for €55. They also have extremely impressive stables that you can visit, and I think sometimes they have horse races there, but I've never actually seen one. And getting into the chateau is a lot easier and way less crowded than Versailles. The next 2 places I'm going to mention are also steeped in history, and one is deeply connected to Napoleon. That is Chateau Malmaison. This is the home that Napoleon and Josephine Bonaparte lived in during their marriage, and Josephine lived there even after their marriage was annulled. It's interesting because we went there a year ago, and it's so crazy to see how very much it looks the same as it did a couple hundred years ago when Napoleon and Josephine lived there. The stylings of their home were so different than, let's say, the elegance or glamour of Versailles. I can't really put it into words very well, but Napoleon and Josephine had a kind of particular taste, and you really have to kind of see it in person to know what I mean. Chateau Malmaison is located on its own grounds, which are a little bit smaller, but next to a really big bois or wood or park, if you will, that is so enjoyable for strolling in, for having a picnic, playing games. We had seen a family playing baseball there or catching balls and playing soccer, and they even had a festival in part of it when we were there. The town of Rueil-Malmaison is right there next to the surrounding woods, and it's also a very cute town in the old part, and we went there and had a really nice lunch after visiting the chateau, or actually maybe before visiting, I can't remember the order, but regardless, it does make for a really nice and beautiful day trip outside of Paris. It's about a 40-minute drive by car from the center of Paris, or a 1-hour commute on public transit. The tickets to get in are extremely inexpensive. I want to say that kids were free, and when I look at regular admission, it's only €6.50 to see the chateau and the permanent collections or exhibits. And the final of the chateaus or castles that I think may be my favorite is actually called Chateau Fontainebleau. From the center of Paris, it's just over an hour drive to get there, and it only takes about an hour and a half on public transportation. This is one of the options, other than Versailles, that I've actually gone to with public transportation, and once I figured it out, it was super easy to do due to the fact that the RATP, or Rapid Area Transit Paris, changing the tickets, as I've mentioned in a previous episode, and now the metro and train tickets are basically the same thing. So if you load your Navigo pass, you can just tap your pass or tap your phone if you have the Bonjour app and go. But also, due to the change, you'll need to purchase bus tickets on your pass as well, because to get from the train station in Fontainebleau to the chateau or into the town, you'll need to take the 3401 bus. I had originally gone to Fontainebleau on a women's retreat with my church, and I just loved the town. It was so quaint and walkable and beautiful. It had boutique shops, an open-air market on that day, a carousel, and all the things. But I really wanted to take Chris and the kids, so when my mom came to visit and she said she wanted to see another castle or chateau while she was in France, we decided to go down there, and since Chris didn't want to drive, we took public transit. And I was looking forward to it as well, because when I went to see Fontainebleau the first time, I didn't go into the chateau. I walked the grounds a little bit, which is free, but I didn't go inside. So once we got to the town, we actually had a quick lunch. Well, it wasn't quick, but it was a good lunch, which I have a few places, different places I can recommend to eat there, since I have been there a couple of times. And then we went to the chateau. Tickets for the chateau are only €14, and anyone under 18 is free. The chateau itself has over 900 years of history, from the Middle Ages until the 19th century. That is literally paraphrased from their website. It was Francis I, who was known for his love of building castles, that commissioned redevelopment in 1528. But it was the family home for the kings of France. All of them, all the way up until Napoleon III. And it has the only Napoleonic throne still in existence that wasn't taken down by the revolution. In fact, Napoleon I abdicated his reign at Chateau Fontainebleau on April 4th and the 6th, apparently, and gave a farewell address before he left for exile on the island of Elba. Now, with that miniature history lesson behind us, I have to say that the reason why I like it so much is because it's like a miniature-ish, because it's certainly not small, version of Versailles. In fact, I feel like you get to see more of it than what you're allowed to see at Versailles. It's royal and elegant and decadent, although maybe decadent is only supposed to use to describe food, and it's not crowded the way Versailles is. And it also has beautiful gardens the same way Versailles does. In fact, the landscape architect André Le Nôtre, who did the gardens of Versailles, also designed Fontainebleau's gardens. Honestly, I like Fontainebleau so much that I would say that it would be a great place to stay if you actually don't want to stay inside of Paris and you would want to take a day trip to Paris to see it. That might be a big statement, but I think it could be true. It's a great place to stay. Okay, and for the fifth and final place, I would recommend that you can take a day trip to from Paris. It's not a chateau and has nothing to do with the kings, but rather it has a lot to do with my favorite artist, Claude Monet. Giverny is the location of Claude Monet's home and gardens. Many of his artworks came from his inspiration of being in his gardens there. It's about an hour and 12-minute drive from the center of Paris, and this is one I hate to say is really a drive, because to try to commute there on public transit would take you closer to 2.5 to 3 hours. But I'm happy to tell you that I looked on the Get Your Guide app, and you could do a day trip from Paris with a tour purchased through the app for about 65 to 67 euro per person. And that would get you the bus ride there and back, entry into the house and gardens, an audio guide, and free time to stroll around and explore the town of Giverny. I can say from experience that it has some delicious restaurants and cafes, other beautiful gardens, quaint boutiques and shops, and it's just overall a delightful village to visit, especially if you enjoy Impressionism like I do. Not that I'm an expert in it at all. I will say that I've learned a lot more about the Impressionist artists since I've lived in Paris, but I've always known that it was my favorite type of art. And it's really interesting to see the gardens just as they were over 100 years ago, still looking the same as in Monet's paintings. Also, it's really cool to see his house. It's very specific and eclectic, if you will. He had a definite fascination with Asia, and you can see that throughout his home. And you can even see the studio where he actually worked preserved perfectly. And that's it for the 5 day trips that you can make from Paris, wrapping up our Highlights of Paris mini-series. As a final note, make sure you check which days different chateaus or museums are closed. For example, Chateau Fontainebleau is closed every Tuesday, as well as Christmas Day, May 1st, and New Year's Day. And for example, if you want to go to Giverny, Monet's House and Gardens aren't open until April 1st, and they close the 1st of November. And now for a few recommendations for eating in Fontainebleau, with the last of them being my Shan Select. The first two establishments that I ate at were during that first trip for my church's women's retreat. There was a lovely dinner that was arranged at Le Nouveau Franklin, our first night there. So that's my first recommendation. And then the next day we had free time at lunch. And so a friend and I went to La Taverne or La Taverne. And that is where I had my first ever salad chèvre chaud, which means hot goat cheese salad. And for those of you that don't like goat cheese, you can pass on this, but they are served throughout Paris and obviously beyond the city limits. And I absolutely love them. The crisp lettuce with the warm or grilled goat cheese topped with lardon or grilled bacon, and a lot of times tomatoes and apple slices and walnuts all come together to be an absolutely succulent and delicious meal. But my final recommendation and today's actual Shan Select is where I went most recently, Le Bistrot 9 or Le Bistrot 9, as you would say in French, because that's how you say 9 in French. As we were looking for a lunch spot and I wanted to try something I hadn't tried before, thus not going to Le Taverne or Le Nouveau Franklin, we were looking at menus as we typically do, which are usually located outside of the restaurant. And a lot of things seemed a bit pricey to try to feed 4 children. But we walked by the menu of the day chalkboard at Le Bistrot 9, and it said it had tartiflette, a family favorite of ours, for only €5. And we thought, we know our kids love tartiflette, so let's go here. So we sat down and then discovered that you couldn't actually order tartiflette all by itself. It was part of the formule or entire menu selection or special of the day. I honestly don't remember what the actual main dish was. I believe it was a succulent roasted chicken with vegetables. So because the prices were higher than we thought, we decided, let's do the formule and we'll get the kids the tartiflette and then we can share some of the main dishes. And then it also came with a tasty choice of dessert. And I'm happy to tell you that the portion sizes were huge and the tartiflette was the best tartiflette we have ever had. Just so you know, tartiflette is like potatoes with cream and bacon and some onions, and it's a very hearty, wintry dish. And it's a dish that we normally have every year when we go to the Christmas markets at the Tuileries Gardens because you can get a lot of it and it's an easy meal that we all like. But this tartiflette was incredible. And so even though for the 7 of us, I actually think we only ordered 3 formules and we all walked away with a delicious meal and we were very happy and we didn't end up spending that much for 7 people. Especially the kids loved it because the formule came with dessert. And now for our quote of the day. It comes from someone that we've talked a lot about today, or at least a bit about today. We visited several of his homes, and he's someone that most people, once they reach, maybe about the 4th or 5th grade, if they are in a first world country, I'm assuming, have probably learned about him, and that's Napoleon Bonaparte. The more I learn about him, the more he actually surprises me. And so it surprises me to say that this quote has been attributed to him because so many of the places that I mentioned today are ingrained as pictures in my mind because of their beauty or their grandeur. And I believe that when you see these places, they will be for you as well. This quote by Napoleon will make sense. He said, "A picture is worth 1,000 words." And he is absolutely right. That's it for today, everybody. I can't wait to meet you back here again next week. We will probably be having another travel episode as my family and I just finished an 8-day train trip through Germany with all 4 kids, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. As a reminder, if you would like the list of Paris Shan Select eateries that I talked about in episode 61, make sure you go to expatriotical.com and scroll to the bottom of the homepage to enter your email address and sign up for the Expatriotical newsletter. And you will also not only receive that first newsletter, but with it a PDF or it might be a PNG of the Paris Shan Select eateries that we have had so far. Thank you all, and I look forward to meeting you back here again next week. Don't forget to share this or any of our 3 Highlights of Paris episodes. And until then, this is Chandra Alley reminding you to live and travel in the know with Expatriotical.